Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Seoul officials claim Russia sent millions of barrels of oil and anti-air missiles to its partner North Korea in exchange for troops to support Moscow's war in Ukraine. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's Attorney General Gates withdraws as a nominee. Gates faced opposition from the Republican Party as he faces allegations of sexual misconduct. Chinese President Xi Jinping meets the Moroccan King and Prime Minister as he visits Casablanca with the aim of expanding cooperation between Beijing and Rabat. The United Arab Emirates urges countries to back the historic resolution to transition away from fossil fuels as COP29 remains in an impasse over the fuel vow. And South Sudan launches a probe into a shootout at the home of the former spy chief Akol Kor, who was sacked almost 2 months ago amid rumors of a coup plot. Hello and welcome. Our top focus is on South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has rejected a bill that intended to protect journalists and lawyers from undue state surveillance. Now, Ramaphosa has returned the bill to Parliament, calling it unconstitutional. The bill in question is called the RICA, that stands for Regulation of Interception of Communications and Provision of Communication-Related Information Amendment. The amendment bill was introduced after a directive by a constitutional court in South Africa that declared the original RICA law as unconstitutional in 2021. Now, this ruling came after an investigative journalism organization in South Africa called the Amabongane Center for Investigative Journalism challenged the law, claiming it is being used by the state to conduct unregulated spying on citizens. It is in this response the Constitutional Court in February of 2021 declared that the law is indeed being misused for mass surveillance, and the RICA did not provide adequate protection to those subject to surveillance by the government. So the court gave Parliament a 3-year deadline to rectify the flaws in the law. But President Ramaphosa has now sent the amendment bill back to Parliament. He has raised concerns that the proposed amendments may still fail to meet constitutional standards. Now, before delving into what issues the president is flagging, let us explain to you what the RICA Act and now its amendment is all about. The original act came into effect in 2003. It was intended in part to protect privacy, combat crime and promote national security. The law requires all cell phone users in South Africa to register their mobile phones. This to allow law enforcement agencies to identify cell phone users and to track criminals using cell phones for illegal activities. The law also prohibits interception of people's communications without their consent, except under certain conditions. But those who challenged the law highlighted its loopholes. The South African Constitutional Court found that the country's state security agency was conducting bulk interception of electronic signals unlawfully. The court found that there was no law authorizing the practice of bulk surveillance, limiting its potential abuse. Now, the law also fails to notify people who were surveilled of the fact afterwards. It does not provide adequate safeguards for the management of the intercepted data. Additionally, it fails to recognize that lawyers and journalists have professional duty to retain the confidentiality of their sources and communications. The court wanted all of these things fixed. The South African presidency responded to the ruling by tabling a bill last year to bridge all of the gaps. Though the bill has been passed by both the houses, President Ramaphosa has not approved it. He says the bill still does not fix everything the court suggested. For example, it does not ensure individuals subjected to surveillance are notified once the monitoring ends. Ramaphosa has requested the National Assembly to consider a fresh draft of the RICA bill. But the delay questions South Africa's ability to balance privacy rights with national security and investigative needs. Journalists and activists have raised concerns that with such laws, they could be the target of state surveillance. How will South African lawmakers strike the right balance between national security and privacy? To discuss more, we have with us Sean Duthie, who is a director at the Control Risks and is joining us live from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how does the rejection of the surveillance bill reflect President Ramaphosa's stance on the balancing of national security with the constitutional right to privacy? And what precedent does this set for future legislation in South Africa?
Yeah, well, I think the Ramaphosa's refusal to sign the bill is more about the recognition that the bill in its current form still does not fulfill the requirements which caused the constitutional court to strike it down in the first place. I don't know if you can say that Ramaphosa sent it back to the National Assembly because he was generally unhappy about the balance between national security and the right to privacy, but I think much more because they knew that there would have very likely been another legal challenge if they had signed the bill as is, and the RICA law would have been struck down for a second time. In regards to precedents, or anything to learn,
right.
I think what could be learned is how easily this bill was able to move through the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces as it is, particularly after the Concord ruling. And I mean, when it went through, the Democratic Alliance, which was the main opposition at that time, they were the only party to say they would not support it. All other parties gladly put it through. So I think the precedent for this really is the National Assembly is going to have to go back and have more debate, more consultations, to ensure they're not sending bills to the president, which he's just going to send back down the line.
Yeah. And what are the key constitutional issues that have been identified in the surveillance bill, and how might these concerns influence the redrafting process in Parliament?
Yeah, so the main reason really, and that the bill is being sent back to the National Assembly, is it still allows the government to conduct surveillance on individuals without any recourse or notifications after the surveillance has been completed. So the new amended bill does designate an independent judge who would review each case. And there are also terms that say that after surveillance is over, the subject would have to be notified within 90 days. But the next article after that gives the government the right to not notify the subject for an indeterminate period. So nothing really has changed. I think this is really one of the main reasons for the initial legal challenge by Amubungane, that people under surveillance must, after the fact, know about it once the investigation is completed. And this will really be the main area which will have to be amended in the National Assembly before Ramaphosa would sign it into law.
Right. And in the context of South Africa's democratic framework, Sean, in your view, how should lawmakers strike a balance between empowering law enforcement and intelligence agencies while simultaneously protecting citizens' privacy and civil liberties?
Now, a very good question. I think one that really is relevant to all democratic countries, and a difficult question, obviously, is it's a very difficult balance to try and ensure that citizens' privacy and liberties are protected, but at the same time, giving national security institutions the intelligence and data that they're going to need to protect the country. I think for lawmakers here in South Africa, in order to get this bill across the line, really, I mean, other than major issues to national security, there's really no reason why a subject who is surveilled should not be notified after the investigation is completed. And even if we are talking national security issues, these would have to be very clearly defined to ensure that the government cannot just use this as a reason to intercept private communications from anyone, such as journalists and lawyers, and in particular journalists and lawyers who might be holding the government to account for corruption, which is actually how the initial legal challenge to the first bill all started.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Thank you very much.
Shifting focus to Kenya, Kenyan President William Ruto has cancelled 2 major deals with India's Adani Group. Ruto made a State of the Nation address on Thursday, which came after months of political turmoil in the country. The highlight of his address was the cancellation of the multi-million-dollar airport expansion and energy deals with Indian tycoon Gautam Adani.
Because of the information that has been provided to us by partner nations, I have directed agencies within the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum to immediately cancel the ongoing procurement process for JKI expansion public-private partnership transaction, as well as the recently concluded Ketrago transmission in public partnership contract.
Kenya had been in the process of signing 2 deals with the Adani Group. One included the planned takeover of Kenya's main airport, the Jomo Kenyatta International, or the JKIA, in the capital of Nairobi. The Adani Group was set to invest $1.85 billion in the airport, in exchange for a contract to run it for 30 years. Adani firm's proposals included building and refurbishing airport terminals, improving its taxiways, and possibly constructing a new runway. The second agreement was a $736 million deal with Kenya's Energy Ministry. Now, the deal was to construct power and transmission lines in Kenya. These deals had met with resistance and unpopularity in Kenya. The country also saw protests and strike by airport workers who said it would lead to degraded working conditions and job losses. The deals were also halted by Kenyan courts, but the government had earlier defended them. But now the decision by Ruto to scrap them comes after the founder of Adani Group, Gautam Adani, was charged in the United States on Wednesday for bribery and fraud. Adani, along with his nephew and 6 other co-defendants, are accused of paying around $265 million in bribes to Indian government officials. These payments were reportedly made to secure lucrative contracts, estimated to generate $2 billion in profit over 2 decades. Adani and his co-defendants are accused of concealing the bribery to raise money in the U.S. However, the Adani Group has called these charges baseless. Ruto's announcement of the cancellation of the deal comes amid growing discontent against his administration. Ruto won a hard-fought election in 2022 with the pitch to help the country's poor. But under his rule, Kenya is reeling under a debt crisis and a rising cost of living. Earlier this year, Ruto proposed new tax hikes in the country to raise revenue. However, these measures met with heavy resistance, and the country saw massive anti-tax protests, which turned into a wider campaign against Ruto. Over 70 people are believed to have been killed in the protests, and the police have been criticized for its crackdown on protesters. In his speech, Ruto said there is an urgent need to reset his presidency after mounting criticism. Turning our attention now to Central Africa, where a golden tooth, believed to be the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was feared missing after the mausoleum housing the relic was vandalized earlier this week. Now, reports suggest that the mausoleum, where the scant remains of the DRC's fiery independence hero Patrice Lumumba are interred, were vandalized on Monday. Now, it was believed that the coffin, which had the gold-capped tooth, thought to be the only known remains of Lumumba, was empty when the police arrived following the incident. Reports also suggest that the glass door of the mausoleum was broken, following which the site was closed to the public and the entrance was sealed. Now, at least 6 people have been placed in detention after an inquiry was opened into the incident, while 2 more people are set to be arrested soon. The mausoleum, which was built in June of 2022, is located in the DRC's capital of Kinshasa and has housed the relic ever since the country's former colonizer, Belgium, returned it 61 years after Lumumba's assassination. Now, condemning the incident, the Cultural Ministry of the DRC called the vandalism as a heinous act aimed at desecrating the burial place. Reports suggest that Lumumba's daughter, Juliana Lumumba Amato, also described the vandalism as a despicable and incomprehensible act. However, in a post on social media platform X, the national hero's grandson, Amory Kalema Lumumba, had claimed that the police officers responsible for protecting the mausoleum were irregularly paid and abandoned in precarious conditions. He also shared a video showing the damaged windows of the mausoleum. Concerns around the security of the site had prompted Lumumba's family to move the golden tooth to a more secure secret location, according to reports. Now, to contextualize, Patrice Lumumba was the first Prime Minister of the DRC from June to September of 1960, following the country's independence from Belgium. He became an anti-colonial icon when he gave a fiery speech against racism on the Democratic Republic of Congo's Independence Day on the 30th of June, 1960. But only a few months after taking over as the Prime Minister, he was forced out by a coup fomented with the help of the Belgium and the CIA. Patrice Lumumba was shot dead in January of 1961 at the age of 35 in the mineral-rich southern province of Katanga, and his body was dismembered and dissolved with acid in an apparent effort to keep any grave from becoming a pilgrimage site. But his gold-capped tooth was taken by a Belgian police official named Gerard Soete, who had overseen the destruction of his body as a memento. And now, in 2016, Belgian authorities seized the golden tooth from the police official's daughter and returned to the DRC after the visit of Belgium's King Philippe, who expressed regrets for his nation's abuses in the Central African country, when it was a colony under their rule. The return of the golden tooth was a cause for celebration in the DRC in 2022. It was taken on a tour of the vast country so that people could pay their respects. But when the Cultural Ministry announced that the mausoleum was vandalized earlier this week and that it had launched an investigation into it, it raised fears and speculation among citizens that the tooth might be stolen and lost. Now, many of them took to social media and commented that the country had fallen to a new low after desecrating the tomb of a hero, while others commented that it is because of a lack of education that the incident occurred. Putting an end to the speculation, the DRC's Interior Minister said on Thursday that the golden tooth was safe, according to reports. However, he did not specify where the tooth is currently located, but said that measures were being taken to strengthen the protection of the mausoleum and to prevent further acts of vandalism. But this incident has raised more questions than answers. Who were the perpetrators, and what was their motive behind this vandalism? Where is the golden tooth being kept by the government, and will it ever be displayed at the mausoleum again or not? And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our next story is from Ethiopia. In the country's war-torn Tigray region in Mekele, a rehabilitation center provides vital support to survivors of the 2-year conflict that claimed 600,000 lives and left over 1 million displaced. Patients receive free treatment and prosthetics, helping them to rebuild their lives. Here's our report.
In war, there may be victors on paper, but the cost is borne by everyone. Lives torn apart, homes destroyed, and dreams shattered. A boy mourns the father he'll never see again. a mother clings to the memories of a child stolen by violence. Soldiers who once marched into battle return broken in body or mind. Some missing limbs, others carrying unseen scars too heavy to bear. But in Mekelle, the capital of Ethiopia's war-ravaged Tigray region, a small beacon of hope persists. A rehabilitation center, the only free facility of its kind in Ethiopia. It offers a lifeline to survivors of unimaginable horrors. For many, this place is the only chance to rebuild lives torn apart by the devastating two-year conflict that claimed an estimated 600,000 lives and displaced over 1 million more. Aregawi Mesgebe, a 29-year-old former mechanic, limps across the center's exercise floor. He fought with the Tigrayan rebel forces, driven by reports of atrocities committed by federal troops. In September 2022, a bomb in the Amhara region took his right leg. Rolling up his trouser leg to reveal a prosthetic, he shares his story, not one of despair, but of cautious optimism.
I would say the service I've received since I entered into medical treatment is very good. The medical treatment I have received wasn't what I expected.
He is one of the lucky ones. For countless others, rehabilitation is a distant dream in a country where resources are painfully scarce. But this center has endured even during the height of the war, thanks to the resilience of its staff and support from organizations like the Red Cross. The facility's director, Brahmi Tiame, emphasizes its impartial mission. He says, and I quote, "During the war, we treated 175 Ethiopian soldiers, even though they came to kill us. We treat anyone who needs help." Patients here include people like Saba Tekle, a 25-year-old banker who lost her forearm and leg in a bombing during the war's early days. She spent months in recovery, her life forever altered, yet she speaks of hope.
When I came out of the coma, my leg was already amputated. I don't remember anything before that. I spent about 4 to 5 months recovering at Mekelle Hospital. After being discharged, I came straight here.
In the workshop nearby, the sound of mallets and drills fills the air. Craftsman Hagos Girme has been making artificial limbs since the year 2001. He himself is disabled, and this happened during Ethiopia's earlier conflicts. He finds solace in his work.
I feel satisfied when I see a client come in with crutches and leave with artificial prosthetics. My happiness grows as I watch them walk while maintaining their balance and posture. That brings us immense joy.
The scars of war in Tigray may take generations to heal. But the rehabilitation center is a step towards mending what has been broken. Yet, even as the peace deal of November 2022 silenced the guns in Tigray, conflict rages on in other regions like Amhara and Oromia. The war may have ended, but for its survivors, the fight continues. This time for dignity, recovery, and a future where hope triumphs over despair. In Mekelle, that fight has a chance.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and goodbye.